Hey, this is Molly from Clean Food Dirty Girl. This is our second take because Luann didn't record it the first time. Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to make a super fast, whole food, plant-based red bean curry with no oil, no animal ingredients, just all plants and herbs and spices, and it's delicious. So the thing is, usually I give you the recipe at the end of the fuckery each week, but today I decided to show you how to do the recipe and include the recipe underneath this video. But I did this for people who are brand new to cooking this way and who just need a visual, right? Or for people who just are more visual learners. So the thing is, I couldn't even, this is just the easiest recipe that I could think of to do this with. This is not complicated. This is super, super easy. The most time-consuming part usually of cooking whole food plant-based is chopping veggies and prepping your ingredients. That's really it. Once that's done, the rest just kind of comes together. So the recipe is a super fast red bean curry, and I'm going to be reading the recipe from my computer because I don't like to print out recipes just because it wastes paper. So I always just do them on my computer. You can see that I have my computer here, and I just kind of go off from those. Okay, so the ingredients that I have here, I'll just go through the list really quick. We have a cup of diced red onions. We have 4 garlic cloves minced. We have 2 green onions that are thinly sliced. We're gonna throw in a can of diced tomatoes. This one's organic without any salt. Whenever you buy diced tomatoes, it's good to get the no salt kind. And we have a can of red kidney beans. So the reason why these kidney beans are in a strainer is because anytime you buy canned beans, you want to pour, open it up, pour the beans into a strainer, run water over them, and rinse them off really well, just to get the residue of the can off. They taste better. So I always put them in a strainer, let them set while I get the rest of my ingredients together. And then we have a bunch of spices. So we have a cinnamon stick here. We have red chili powder.
Sorry.
Okay, so Luann also has a bit of a cough, and that's okay. You can record me. So she's coughing, but you know how we roll. Do you just want to set it down for a second when you go cough? Okay, can you see me? Okay, so she's gonna go cough, and I'm gonna tell you the rest of these ingredients. Okay, so we have red chili powder here. We have turmeric. We have coriander in this one. We have some cumin powder here. We have some ginger here, powdered ginger, and a bay leaf. And then we have salt and pepper and a ½ cup of water. And then we have some spinach here, which I will add in the end. Okay, so let me talk to you about these ingredients really quick. So whenever I'm working on a recipe, whenever I'm coming up with a recipe or testing a recipe, I always, first of all, read the recipe first so I know what I'm getting myself into. Because there's nothing like thinking that you're starting on a really quick, easy recipe, and then it turns into like a fuck show of like a 10-hour recipe. Now, luckily, none of our recipes are 10 hours. But it's just a good idea to read them over to get a gauge of what you're getting yourself into before you start. Now, the other thing that I do that makes it a lot easier to throw the recipe together is to actually prep and measure out all the ingredients before you start, because you're gonna have to do it anyways. But let's say, for instance, I only diced the onion and the garlic, and then I started sauteing these, and then the recipe calls for all of these spices. I don't want to be trying to like measure out spices as I'm trying to add them to the pot, because it's going to be like a clusterfuck, right? It's like I'm going to be confused and panicked, and I'm not going to do it right. So the chillest, most chillax way to do this is just to read the recipe and just measure everything out before you even start. Okay, so measuring out all your ingredients first will make this process a whole lot easier, a whole lot faster, and a whole lot less stressful if you're like somebody who's stressed in the kitchen or you're new to the kitchen or whatever. Okay, so these are the ingredients and we are ready to go. So you notice here that we don't have any oil or any butter, and that's because whole food plant-based cooking doesn't have oil or butter. Hooray! So that means that when I clean up my dishes, it's So easy because you don't have to wipe the oil and clean the oil that sticks to everything and clings to everything. So, but I'm going to show you how to do it without oil. It's actually really easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat a medium-sized pot up for 2 minutes before we add anything to it. So in all of our recipes they're all oil-free, but anytime you're sauteing something or cooking something, we have you heat up the pot for about 2 or 3 minutes. And this is just to get it nice and hot so that when you add the onions, they're going to get that sizzle and they can start to cook right away. So it's kind of like a faster saute. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to use this pot. So this is like my go-to medium-sized pot. It's a little bit larger than medium, but I like it. It's solid. So I'm going to heat this over medium heat. So we're just going to do that. And I'm just going to set my timer. So I have a timer. So this is just like a kitchen timer. And I think I got it at Target, but it's really, really helpful. So I'm just going to set it for 2 minutes. And when 2 minutes is up, I know that this is nice and ready. So even when we're like testing recipes for the meal plans, or even I don't usually cook if I'm not coming up with recipes or testing recipes for the plans, but this timer, if you don't have one, go get one. Now, sometimes I need a double timer, so I will use a timer on my stove as well so that I have 2. But timer, really handy kitchen thing if you don't have one. So I was gonna try to be cool and make it stick, but look, it doesn't stick. Does it stick to the toaster? There, it sticks to the toaster. We'll just do that instead. Okay, so the recipe says to heat the pot heat up the pot for 2 minutes, and then we're going to add the onions and cook for about 5 minutes. So we're gonna cook the onions separately from the garlic because garlic tends to burn a lot easier. And what we're gonna do with these onions is cook them enough so that they start to caramelize. And when you cook them by themselves, or when you cook any alliums, whether there's oil or not, what happens is the cooking process draws out their natural sweetness, and that's what makes the flavor of soups and anything with alliums in it, right? Because onions are in the allium family, have that really deep, rich flavor. So it's really important to cook your onions for long enough to draw out that flavor. Now, when you use water sauteing, which is another no oil cooking method, I find that the alliums don't get as flavorful. Like the garlic and the onions just don't get as flavorful than when you dry saute them. So that's what we're doing today. There's nothing in the pot at all. It's completely dry, and these are gonna go in. And if you're used to cooking with oil and you're seeing this and you're like, I don't know how this is gonna work. Honestly, after a few recipes cooking without oil, you'll see that there's really no need for it. So here we go. Timer is off. So I'm gonna add the onions, and you can kind of hear that sizzle. All right. So I'm gonna set the timer for 5 minutes just to keep an eye on them. Now, the thing is, I could cook these for longer. It doesn't have to be 5 minutes necessarily because this is a curry, so it's gonna cook in the tomatoes and the beans and the spices and a little bit of water anyways. But the point to cook it for 5 minutes is to really draw out that sweetness of the onion. So that's why I'm doing it for 5 minutes. And like I said, I don't want to add the garlic yet because the garlic will burn. Whereas the onions won't burn. I'm going to make sure that they don't burn. Now, they could burn if you did them for long enough. But I'm just going to take my wooden spoon here and just give a little stir and then just let them do their thing. And it smells really good. The smell's coming out. The sweet onion smell is there. So we're just going to let that go for a minute. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put my dish away. Rinse it out here. Now, the other thing about using a pot like this that's pretty thick is it doesn't burn as easily. So if you're using like a pot like this, right? The bottom is thinner. So this has a thicker material, so it's not touching the flame as hot. So with this, it's a thinner bottom, right? So things tend to burn a little bit more easily. So when I'm sauteing any kind of onions or garlic, like any kind of alliums or any veggies, I really like to use this heavy cast iron stock pot. Okay, so if you look in here, you can see that the bottom is starting to get a little brown. Can you see that? Perfect. Okay, and that's good. That just means that the onion, they're just starting to brown up. So at this point, you want to stir. And it's not dry and it's not sticking because onions have water in them. And so as you cook them and as they get hot, the liquid and the water kind of releases. And so it makes it so that it's, especially in a pan like this, it doesn't stick so much. It hasn't stuck at all yet, but it's only been like, we still have like 3 minutes to go. So if you're using a pot that doesn't have that thick bottom and you notice that the onions are starting to stick or burn or brown, what you can do is take just a splash of water, put the water in there, stir it, and then it's going to caramelize those onions. Now just a little bit, I would say like a tablespoon. No, I don't measure it out. I would just take my water kettle that I place right next to my stove for this purpose. Well, I mean, I use it for other things, but it's handy to have this because I always have some water in here. So as soon as something starts to stick, I just add a little bit in there, I'll stir. So I'll show you. So you can, if you look in here again, you can see the bottom is getting browned. So there's we're getting a little bit of stick, but not much. But I'm going to show you anyways. So you see how the bottom of the pot is, or the pan is, pot pan, whatever, is kind of brown. So I'm just going to add a touch of water. So you can kind of hear that, and then you give it a stir, and it gets up all those browned bits, and it incorporates them right into the onions. And that's caramelizing them. I mean, obviously, a true caramelization would take like much longer than 5 minutes, but that's the basic idea. I mean, we're drawing the sweetness out of the onions and making them really deep and rich in flavor by doing this. And you notice, like, there's no oil. Oil isn't what makes the flavor of food delicious, right? It's all of the veggies and all of the garlic and the onions and the spices and the veggies and the beans and that. It's all the ingredients. It's not the oil, because like if you just took a spoon of olive oil and tried it, it's not going to taste delicious. So this is what makes food delish. And as you see, we don't need it. We don't need oil. So all right, so we have about 43 seconds here now. Luann's gonna cough a little bit. That's all right. We all cough from time to time. It's just how we roll. Okay, so we're getting towards the end, and they're looking nice and soft and brown, and it's smelling delicious. So I'm gonna read the next part of the recipe here. Okay, so add the garlic and green onions and cook for an additional minute. So we're going to find the garlic here and the green onions here, and we're going to stir for an extra minute. Now, how precise do you have to be with this? Not like crazy precise, but you want to, you know, if you're newer to cooking this way, then follow it. Use the timer, follow the times, and you'll be fine. Okay, so now let's just look in here real quick one more time. You see how nice and brown it is? That's perfect. Okay, so we're going to add the garlic. Boom. Take my fingers. And then we're going to add the green onions. All right. I'm just going to set the timer for a minute because we don't want to overdo it, or else the garlic will start to get toasty. And when garlic burns and gets brown, it gets really bitter. So you don't want to overcook or burn garlic because it's not pleasant. Now you see how the bottom here is kind of browned? That's fine, but I want to kind of get some of that brown stuff off from the skillet and incorporate it into the veggies. So I'm just going to add a little water. And I'm going to stir. And you see how it just gets all those little bits from the bottom up and incorporated into the rest of this. And that little bit of extra moisture will also make it so that the garlic doesn't get too toasty. Okay. So we're going to let that go for 7 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So let's go over here and see what else we need. All right. Add the tomatoes, kidney beans, cinnamon stick. Basically, we're gonna add the rest of the ingredients to the pot. Okay, apart from the spinach. So in go the kidney beans. And these are just canned kidney beans. Like, of course, if you make your own kidney beans, you can use those. But just for time's sake, canned is fine. Okay, we're gonna add the tomatoes. Here comes the chili powder and the coriander. Here's the turmeric and the cumin and the pepper and the salt, the cinnamon stick, ginger powder, and the bay leaf. Okay, so we have all that stuff on top. So what we're gonna do now is also add the water. Okay, we're gonna stir it. So you just want to like gently stir it. Don't go crazy with it. Just you want to keep that bay leaf intact. So you can see here the cinnamon stick is kind of floating around. I'm gonna push down the sides so that all this goodness gets incorporated into here. All right, so, and it smells delicious. It smells like an Indian restaurant, which is a good sign. All right, so let's see what we're gonna do. All right, so we're gonna simmer with the lid on the pot at an angle for 20 to 25 minutes until most of the liquid has been absorbed. Okay, so we're gonna put, we'll keep it on, we'll turn it down just a little bit. We're gonna put this lid on at an angle. So this one can't really go at an angle, but I'm just gonna put it so that a little bit of the steam can escape. We just don't want to put it on completely. We just want to put it there, just so if you do have a lid that can go at an angle, you can use that, but this one doesn't have that. So I'm just going to add it here. Now, the reason why we have it, I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. So if you ever see a recipe that has like, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes or 35 to 40 minutes, always go with the lower number first and check and see if it's done. Just because it depends on like your altitude, it depends on your stove or your oven, it depends on the cookingware that you're using, cookware you're using. So there's a lot of variables. So that like 5 minutes, just we kind of give you just depending on what your particular situation is. So always go with the shortest amount of time, check on it, and then kind of gauge. So we wouldn't have to necessarily cook this for a full like 20 minutes because, I mean, you could eat it right now, basically. But by giving it 20 minutes, we're just kind of giving it a chance for all the flavors to incorporate. Now, a true curry, right, should be cooked for much longer and just like left on the stove overnight, and then the next morning is perfect. But this is like kind of cheater curry, right? This is super fast. So, 20 minutes is going to be able to build up enough flavor profile for it to be really rich and really delicious. So what we're going to do is just, and you can see it's just, it's all here kind of simmering away. And I wish that this video had smell because it really does smell amazing. Okay, so I'm going to put that back on and I'm going to say goodbye for a moment. I'm going to come back. We'll check it. Okay, see you soon. Okay, I'm back. So it's been about 21-ish minutes. And here we go. So you can see that most of the water has been evaporated. And that's why we leave the cover on at an angle. So if we were to put the lid totally on, the water wouldn't reduce, right? Because that steam is basically the water escaping through steam. So if this was on, then it wouldn't get thick and rich like this. So that's why we want to let some of that escape by putting a lid on at an angle or just leaving a little slot open. Okay, so here it is now towards the end of cooking. Like I stirred this maybe 4 times during that process, just to make sure that things weren't sticking to the bottom. And especially towards the end, just giving it a couple stirs just to make sure it doesn't stick is always a good idea. So here's the deal. one thing I want to say about this way of cooking is that it's very forgiving. So it's not like fancy French cooking that it's really on technique and you have to get things at a certain temperature and a certain what. It's very basic, it's very easy, it's very forgiving, especially stuff like curries and soups and casseroles and stuff like that. So the recipe you'll see calls for kale, but I'm out of kale, which is weird because I'm never out of kale, but I am. So I have spinach. So I'm going to use spinach instead, which is fine. You can use any green you want. If you wanted to use pinto beans instead of kidney beans or black beans instead of kidney beans, that would be fine as well. If you wanted to use fresh tomatoes instead of canned diced tomatoes, you could have used fresh diced tomatoes. If you don't like cumin powder, then just leave that one out. Like literally, you can tailor it to your taste. So don't think that you have to follow the recipe exactly to the T or else it won't turn out. It will turn out. It'll taste slightly different, but it'll be fine. If you didn't have any fresh garlic, you could use garlic powder. For 3 cloves of garlic, I might put a half a teaspoon of garlic powder. So just know that it's very forgiving. And if you're new to this, it's hard to mess it up. Okay, so I'm going to grab the spinach. So for you, if you're following the recipe, it's kale, maybe it's chard, maybe it's collard greens, it all works. So I turned the stove off, and what's going to happen is, especially for the spinach, as soon as I stir it, the heat from the curry is just going to wilt the spinach perfectly, so I don't have to keep the heat on. I can just stir it in, incorporate it, and it'll get down in size, and it'll just start to wilt. Okay, there we go. So you see now we have this delicious, thick pot of goodness. So you can see now that the spinach gets bright green and kind of gets smaller, and there we go, easy. So right now we have a cinnamon stick in here, and we also have a bay leaf. So let me talk about that. So if you want, I prefer to leave the cinnamon stick and the bay leaf in because that will continue to flavor it. However, if you're not used to eating things that have like bay leaf or cinnamon stick or bigger things in it that you don't want to eat, because you don't want to eat that cinnamon stick, you don't want to eat the bay leaf. It's just in there to add flavor. So if you are concerned about you or one of your guests that you're having over for dinner, or like your spouse or your kids, then just take those things out. You don't have to keep them in there. So if somebody else is like, if you're going to put this in the fridge and then your kid's going to grab it and eat some, maybe just take out the cinnamon stick and the bay leaf, just so you don't have to worry about it. Now, if it's just you eating and you're like, no, I know that I'm not going to eat that, then leave it in there. It's fine. Now, as you can see, like, it's kind of hard to, like, the cinnamon stick is easy to spot. It's right here. The bay leaf, sometimes you have to look around a little bit to find it. It's kind of like, where's Waldo? I know that it's in there. Okay, here it is. Okay, so you could take that out now. You could take the cinnamon stick out now. Now, I'm just going to leave it in, and I know that I'm going to look for that when I eat it. All right. So, what would I eat this with? You could eat it over brown rice. You could eat it over quinoa. You could just have it plain in a bowl. You could have it with a big green salad on the side.
Toast. Toast.
Oh, yes. Luann said you could have it over toast. Sure, why not? She does that. Anything, really. You could put it in a burrito if you wanted, like a curry burrito. Sure, why not? So many, many ways to have this. So that's really it. I mean, it really couldn't be more simple than that. And just, if this way of cooking intimidates you, just try this recipe. Try this one recipe and see what you think. And if nothing else, your house is going to smell amazing, and the smells are going to waft out of your kitchen, and your neighbors are going to wonder what's going on. I want to talk to you really quickly about spices. So I'm going to show you how sorry, my nose is itching. Okay. Okay, so I'm good. All right, so spices. I live in Hawaii where it's very humid. If I leave my spices out, they will get moldy. I know, it sucks. I can't complain because I live in Hawaii. But if I could complain, that would be one of my complaints, one of my few complaints. So here's what I do. And anybody who lives in a really humid, warm climate, can do this if you want. So here's what I have. Now I have to do this every time I make or create a recipe. So I have my spice containers. So the one on the bottom is the ones that I use least often. So I can just put a top on. And then the ones I use most often are here where I can more easily access them. All right, and one thing that I do is because I'm looking at them from this angle, I write the names of them on top so that I can just go in and grab one. But it's regardless of where you're keeping your spices or storing your spices, it's helpful to have them all together, and it's helpful to have a lot of them. And your spice, I mean, the more you cook this way, your spice collection will naturally add and get bigger over time. But if you do live in a humid, hot area and you're having trouble with your spices getting moldy, this works. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but it does work. But regardless, if you don't live in a hot, humid place and you can leave your spices out, awesome. Like I would love to be able to have a beautiful spice rack, just cannot happen. But I do keep them all together, and so these are like glass jars that I use, and that's that. So I wanted to talk briefly about that. And I think that's it. All right, I hope that you make this recipe and that you tell me in the comments below how it went and what you thought of it. All right, just dive in, welcome to the dirty waters. Okay, bye.